Welcome to episode 2 of After Some Wine. And this time I am actually drinking wine instead of whiskey and coke. And this time around, instead of music or reviewing a movie like this great movie You Are Alone that I just watched, we are going to go over a personal story or two. People who know me know that I have a kind of weird sense of humor at times. For example, you can only see me, from the chest up here, but I don't have anything on below the waist, just because I want to irritate you, even though you can't see it, so don't worry. But one part of my humor, nonverbal, is I still enjoy startling people. Jumping out from behind a corner or setting something up so that they'll see it when they come around a corner, things like that. And I know where that comes from. That comes from our family. There were 6 children or less, depending on what period of time it is, but eventually there were 6 children in the family, and we were a very anxious bunch of children because our household was like a minefield, and the mine was my mother. And you wanted to avoid setting her off if you could, because if you set her off, the mines started exploding left and right, and you were in for a long bout of bombardment. Not really directed at you, you just got to hear it. Because when she went off one of her rants, she would send everybody up to their rooms, and usually she'd, headquarter herself in the kitchen at the sink, banging pots and pans around and either yelling or crying or making up songs about us children, or my father, her husband, or my father's relatives. The way the story was explained to me was that my father was engaged to a woman, and his parents and her parents got together and broke it off because they weren't happy with that arrangement. So he pretty much got engaged to the next woman that he could to irritate his parents, which was my mother. And they went ahead and got married, even though his parents did not want him to marry her. And they then disowned him, and I guess her too, but she wasn't part of the family until they got married. And they had some money, so that was always a source of angst to my mother, that his family had money, but they weren't giving it any to us, although they were apparently giving small amounts as gifts to us children for help pay for a week or two at day camp in the summer and things like that. But so she wasn't fond of my father's family. I don't even remember meeting my father's father, my paternal grandfather, ever. I probably did, but I don't remember. And I don't remember meeting my paternal grandmother until I was 12 or 13, although I imagine I met her at least once or twice before that, because they didn't really want to have anything to do with our family, and my mother made sure that they wanted even less to do with our family, even when they did. My father had 2 brothers, I think. Who knows? We'll say 2 brothers. And my mother would often work members of that family into her little songs that she'd create while she was smashing pots and pans around and banging dirty dishes in the sink, which never seemed to get clean. They just continued to soak in the filthy, moldy, disgusting water for weeks on end in the sink. But her 3 favorite targets in these little diatribes were the children, which were the slobs, or the pigs. That's us. The bobs referred to my father's brothers, one of whom was named Robert, so he was Bob. and that was his family, and then his mother, which was Isabelle. So there were the Slobs, the Bobs, and Stinking Isabelle. Those were her three favorites. And she could go on for half an hour or an hour at a time, screeching, making up rhymes and songs. I mean, I find that I do the same thing now that I'm grown, but mainly I make up songs and sing them to my cats, and they're not about how miserable my children and my husband's family make me, which is what her songs are mainly about. But so the idea was not to set her off, because if you did, then that's what you're going to get. We were going to be sent up to our rooms. My room that I at one point was my own, and later I shared with my youngest brother, was horrendously filthy, and it was as bad as some of what you see on Hoarders these days on television. You had paths from the door to the closets and from the door to the beds, and just garbage and broken toys and whatever else everywhere. So you didn't really want to get sent to your room because there was nothing to do there. A lot of times if she'd had a fit and we'd all been sent off to our rooms, this is where having an anxious household and an anxious bunch of children would come to play. We never discussed it openly, but it was clear looking back that we learned that you had to find humor in everything. You had to laugh at anything that would be painful and find things that were funny about it, or else you'd be miserable like my mother. So one of the things that we used to do was, like I said, jump out from behind corners and scare at each other, because we were always on edge about bumping into my mother and having to talk to her or deal with her or catch her in one of her crying moods or set her off into one of her angry moods. So, we used to startle each other all the time and throw things at each other, and it was generally understood between the children that in our household, if somebody was going to touch you, it was to do something bad to you. Not to beat you, our parents didn't beat us or anything like that. It was that if one of your siblings was going to touch you, it was almost always because they were going to put something down your back or put something in your hair or smear something on your face or, do something, punch you or give you an Indian rope burn or a noogie or whatever. So we tried to avoid contact with each other because contact usually led to something bad happening, purposely, and something that the other person would think was funny. But one of our more enjoyable games was to try to startle each other. And the more you could scare or startle someone, the better. And I think it was my oldest brother who came up with what became one of our favorite pastime games. My two sisters were usually excluded from a lot of these things because it didn't seem fair to pick on them. It was mainly the boys picking on the boys. And no one was really immune. You could catch my older two brothers who would share a room for a while unawares and scare them, or I could be the victim or my youngest brother. But one of the favorite games that my oldest brother created involved a prop, which was known only as the guitar. At some yard sale or garage sale or somewhere, my father had picked up an old acoustic guitar with a crack in the body, and it was missing 2 strings. It was beaten up. Nobody knew how to play it. That was before even my oldest brother had started taking guitar lessons or anything. We were a musical family, and we had a lot of little musical instruments around, but just toy musical instruments. But so maybe he thought it would be something useful, but there was no way to make music with it. So instead, my oldest brother came up with a new game to play, which was Mom Wants You. You'd be, hiding in your room, trying to avoid any contact with my mother. And sometimes the games would, we'd already had for a long time just the game of knocking on the other person's door. There were 2 bedrooms very close to each other. Knock on the door and go back in your room, and then the person gets nervous because they don't know if it's my mother at the door, and they open the door and there's nobody there. And then they said, "Oh, they're just trying to trick us." I think on one of my websites I have some audio of some of that my brother Paul had recorded by sneaking a microphone under the door or something. But the guitar play made that game much more enjoyable for everybody, because what you did with the guitar was you went out in the hallway and you leaned the guitar up against the other person's door so that it was just carefully balanced there. And then you knocked on the door and say, "Mom wants you." Now, of course, just the fact that Mom wants you is enough to create this huge ball of lead and angry wasps in your stomach, because now you're going to have to go deal with her. And you don't know what kind of mood she's going to be in. If she's fine, then she's fine. If she's in one of her moods, you don't know what she wants or what you did wrong. So, once you're mentally prepared, you'd go and you'd open the door, and surprise, the guitar is leaning there and would fall down and not only bash into your feet, giving you immediate stub toes and pain, but the noise was deafening, especially because you were already on edge, and it would inevitably result in some horrible scream. And on occasion, if it was my youngest brother, a little bit of crying. And then, of course, threats of repercussions and whatever else we were going to do. The only time that game wasn't so much fun is when that happened, and then we could hear my mother screaming from downstairs about the noise, and "Be quiet up there!" Which meant that we were now preparing to set her off through our own games. But still, that was a favorite game, was leaning the guitar against the door and knocking the door and saying, "Mom wants you," because there were occasions where she actually did want somebody. So, it was sort of a bunker mentality, and we found humor in trying to make each other nervous wrecks and sobbing in the fetal position, miserable little bastards. But, at least that would be fun for everybody else. Not so much fun for the victim, but, we found things to laugh at. I mean, we always found some joy in something. Even to the point of, and it's going to sound morbid to some people, but there were times where when my mother wasn't home and she was coming home, somebody would start a conversation about, wouldn't it be great if she never came home? Not so much because we didn't want her to be there, although we sort of didn't, or because we wanted her dead. It was more because we would talk about and debate at length how much time we could take off school because she had disappeared or died. And being able to miss days of school was like winning the lottery to people in our family. So we would debate at length, how long could we go, how could we play it out that we were so upset that we had to miss weeks and weeks of school. And then inevitably we'd hear her pulling into the driveway, and then we'd oh well. So much for that idea. I mean, yes, that's morbid, but it didn't cause any harm, just like myself and another brother, who shall remain nameless, used to debate when we were walking to junior high school, what would happen if we saw a kid hit by one of the school buses that were going down the steep hills, and how much time could we get off school for that, and how we could play that off into severe psychological damage every time someone brought up school, and just, are you ready to go to school again? You've missed 3 weeks. You think you're over it? Oh yeah, I'm ready to go to school. Yeah, school. Billy was going to school, and he got hit by the bus. Now he's dead. School, death. School, death. School, death. School. Okay, you don't have to go yet. You can take another week off. It's okay. So, you know, that's what we found humor in. We could find humor in the most morbid and dark subjects. It really didn't matter. And we still find humor in those subjects, both in current life and talking about things from the past. I mean, it's, people love the story of the time that I chased one of my brothers around the outside of the house with an axe and tried to kill him. I mean, he was bigger than me and I couldn't catch up to him. If I had, I know I would have tried to kill him, but, you know, they liked that story because, you know, no one got hurt and it was funny. I do remember after that, my father talked about sending me away to military school, but I think he found out that it cost money, and then the subject was never brought up again. Anyway, that's the personal story version of After Some Wine, and I'm going to finish up the wine here and then post this, and then have some more wine, and who knows what comes next. Next episode, probably be reviewing a movie, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing, so if you tune in for that, my condolences.